Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we have a privilege to learn from one of the legendary coaches, John Wooden. And if you haven't heard of him, I would definitely encourage you to tune in because he was one of the best coaches in basketball, college basketball at UCLA that in history. And so we have the privilege today of speaking to someone who worked with him and who extracted all the learning from him and developed a course and a book and a program around what he learned from John Wooden, and that is Lynn Guerin. And I love what the PR agency, which is, by the way, a little plug, C.S. Lewis Publicity, PJ Lawrence, connected us. He actually said, if America were an NCAA basketball team, we'd be looking at a 0-32 season. Employees are missing crucial shots as job worries spike to levels that we haven't seen in years. Our coworkers and communities have split into politically polarized shirts versus skins. And as a result, we are fouling out and fumbling mission critical assists. So how do we get our A game back as this country is so divided? And that is going to be the topic of conversation. So it's what Lynn has learned from John Wooden and how do we apply it to what's going on in America today and what's going on in individual lives and businesses today that you'll be able to use to move forward and create success. And I'm not going to use the word winning because John didn't use the word winning. It's not about winning. It's about creating success. And we'll talk about that. So Lynn, welcome. We're excited to have you here today.
Oh, Nicole, my pleasure to be here. Excited. Nothing I'd rather do than talk about this topic and share Coach Wooden with as many people as we possibly can. That's really the beauty of who he was in his life, and the fact that I had an opportunity to spend so much time with him. My joy in life is really to be able to give other people that experience and to see if they can come as close as possible to having John Wooden be their coach and their mentor, which he can be.
Yes. It's not often. I can only think of maybe a couple of times where I've had someone on the show that is actually talking about what they learned from someone else. I had someone on the show that talked about what he learned from his father, who was very, very successful in music and so forth. But it's not often. Usually it's, people talking about their firsthand experience. The nice part about you is you have a tremendous amount of life experience that you could easily just speak from that standpoint. But because you value what you learned from Coach Wooden, that we're actually going to be speaking in that context. So with that in mind, maybe for our listeners who don't know John Wooden, and maybe there's people there because we do have listeners internationally that haven't heard of him, tell us a little bit about who he was and sort of what his track record was and what makes it so important to have this conversation today.
Yeah, Nicole, if you, John Wooden is considered pretty much America's greatest coach. If you just Google that on the internet, who's the greatest coach of all time? There's a lot of debate, maybe across all the sports, who might be the number two coach or the number three coach, and the names like Coach K and Vince Lombardi and all of the other great coaches will be mentioned, but about 99% of the time, the answer that comes up on who's the greatest of all time, those will say Coach Wooden. Even Coach K, the great coach from Duke, would say there's no debate. There's a lot of debate on who number two is, but there's no debate on who the greatest coach is, and that's John Wooden. And John Wooden was a basketball coach at UCLA for 27 years. He was a high school coach before that. He coached at Indiana State University before that. He hasn't coached a basketball game since 1975. The very last game he coached was March Madness. His final game was an NCAA championship game, which he won, his 10th in 12 years, which is pretty remarkable. He set records that will never be equaled in the men's game. Gino Auriemma is doing a pretty good job on the women's side, matching Coach's record. But as a basketball coach, and the run of success he had was absolutely unequaled. But he was so much more about more about just coaching basketball. He really was a great coacher, a great coach, and a great teacher of life. Um, he was involved in the writing of 18 books in his 80s and 90s. He was coaching literally, Nicole, right up to his final breath. And I mean that literally. The final words that he shared on earth are a lesson for literally everybody on what really your priorities in life need to be and what ultimately you might be focused at the most important moment in your own existence. It's a pretty powerful story. So, Coach has so much to share with us about life and true success. And he's famous for a diagram called the Pyramid of Success, which I believe is the single most comprehensive blueprint of high value, high character, high competence performance behavior that was ever constructed. I think Coach believed it maybe was his greatest contribution, literally here on earth. And part of my mission is for the world to rediscover it and to make it as important as it should be for how it can impact individual behavior, but how it can change families and organizations and communities. It's a blueprint for changing many of the problems that you described with America's game today. If we could get everybody on John Wooden's Pyramid of Success, about 95% of those problems would go away very quickly.
Absolutely. Now, just to start off with, when we talk about success, he had a different definition of success than what most people, certainly in America, have or have had. Now, I know that over the last 12 months, people are starting to reprioritize what is important to them. And so that's starting to shift. But can you just give us the definition that he offered as of what success really is, so we have a baseline?
Yeah, Nicole, his whole journey really started around this idea of trying to understand as a young teacher what true success is and how he could impart this to his students and the parents and the players, the people that he was involved in. And he remembered a lot of things about what maybe success could be. Webster's definition, the accumulation of material possessions or the attainment of a position of power or prestige. He thought about that. And ironically, that definition has been around a long, long time, but it's pretty amazing how much it is centerpiece of how people still think about success. But he thought those were worthy achievements, but not indicative of success as he thought about it. And he thought about what his dad used to teach him about never try to be better than someone else, but never cease to be the best that you can be. He remembered that. Uh, he remembered a little poem that he recalled, and he loved poetry. He actually had a master's degree in poetry, a little poem called At God's Footstool. And went something like this: At God's footstool to confess, a poor soul knelt and bowed his head. I failed, he cried. The master said, Thou didst thy best. That is success. And that poem had a big impression on him. So he actually wrote his own definition of success. And that brought a lot of these elements. And he spent literally a couple of years working on it until he fine tuned it and got it where he said, Yep, this is the one I'm going to spend the rest of my life pursuing. And he did. And that definition was success is peace of mind that comes with the self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to do the best of which you are capable. So he had these four key components to success. And where it starts is absolutely critical for the world that we're living in today. Success starts with peace of mind. You are not successful if you ultimately do not have peace of mind. Coach would say, right? No pillow more comfortable than a clear conscience. So that peace of mind was so important. And then self-satisfaction. Your ultimate success comes from ultimately how you feel about it. And you only know whether deep down in your heart, whether you gave your best. And there may be lots of ways that the world tells you you're successful, but ultimately you're the one who really knows. And then those two other key elements, the best effort that you can bring every day based on the gifts and talents and capabilities that you had. And he felt if those four things were in place, you could see yourself as a true success. The other thing that was so important about those four things were those are things that you have control over. Everything else that gets defined as success, ultimately, you don't have control over. I mean, you can be a billionaire one day and be on the streets the next because suddenly your business has changed, a pandemic has hit, the stock market has gone upside down. Wherever you think your securities lie, they ultimately have to lie inside you. The spirit that God gives you, the gifts that God gives you, and the work and the capability you put in to achieve that success that gives you true peace of mind.
Absolutely. And, I talk a lot about identity. What you're talking about is that where does your identity come from? A lot of times our identity comes from what's going on out there and how much we have or how many accolades we get. And we're talking about, you know, a great coach. A great coach also has a great track record, but he was more than that, building humans, good humans that then would play basketball and do well. So the scoreboard matters, but it's not the primary thing. And so often I notice that and especially like I say this last year, those that had derived their identity from the external things got a rude awakening as, like you said, it started to get, taken away. And then you figure out, like, what do I actually have left? And that those last dying breaths, there's no U-Hauls, the old saying, right? There's no U-Hauls behind the hearse. Like, you're not taking any of that with you. None of that really, really matters. I want to talk about winning, because another thing that is very distinct about what Coach Wooden taught and how he operated was the fact that he never talked about winning. And he certainly won a lot of championships, but he never talked about it. So why did he not talk about it? And how did he create the win without actually making that the quote unquote focus?
Yeah, I might even link. There was actually one more point I wanted to make of with success as you were talking about all those material things, and I'll then connect the dots to winning or not winning, or why I didn't talk about it. He actually was involved in the writing of a children's book called Inch and Miles: The Journey to Success. And in that book, he wrote a little poem as a definition of success for children. And I'll share that poem with you quickly, but I'm not so sure that the poem isn't more relevant to adults than it was to children. And it went like this: success isn't having trophies or toys. It isn't a medal or friends of your choice. What is success? That's easy to see. It's trying to be the best that you can be. Don't worry what others might have or might say. When trying your best, success comes your way. Well, getting that concept into the heads of a child very early can shape them in some incredible ways. And one of the things, obviously, that kids are caught up in this day, today is this idea that they have to be a winner. And man, it starts in Little League. It starts at the lowest levels, where they feel like they have to win and they have to compete and they have to be better than everybody else. And the only thing that really matters is what the scoreboard says at the end of the game. And mom and dad are hollering their heads off in the stands if they're winning or not winning, and trying to impact everything to help them win. All of those things very detrimental to a child's growth and their ability to really compete at the highest levels. So how did John Wooden win without talking about winning? He talked about all of the things it took to win. He never mentioned the word winning or losing any time in his coaching career. I have never talked to any of his players from Indiana State, literally now, who are in their 80s and 90s, to the men that played for him at UCLA, that ever heard him use the word win. So he was always talking about best effort. He was very focused on the process it took to develop the fundamentals that ultimately enabled you to execute the game the best that it could be. He talked about preparation. He talked about the importance of the team. The star of the team is always the team. And today, right, the emphasis is so much on the individuals who play the game and how fancy they play it or how athletic they are, or all those kinds of things. And we've really lost sight of those fundamentals that create really great team play. And that's what Coach was all about. He coached his teams like he coached his family. And he thought about them in that same context. And he didn't talk to the family about winning or losing either, right? He talked to them about doing their best and being their best and being the best people they can be and being kind and being considerate. And he was also a day-to-day example of all of the blocks on the pyramid of success. So he was exemplifying the behavior that it took to win. As an example, he never gave the fiery win one for the Gipper speeches. He didn't believe in emotional peaks because every emotional peak creates an emotional downfall. The peak that gets raised ultimately, gets balanced, and the team will come down from that peak. So he was always trying to create that ever emerging level of excellence and being able to execute things better and better, faster and faster under more challenging and more difficult conditions. It's, as an example, it's one of the reasons he was in 10 national championship games as the UCLA coach. 10 times he played in the Final Four's final game. He won all 10 of those games because his players had the ability never to be caught up in how big the moment was. They had been so prepared to handle that moment, they actually thought the games seemed slow compared to the practices he ran. So many things that enabled him to win, but never have to talk about winning.
Well, I love that in your book, Coach 'em Way Up, the 5 lessons for leading the John Wooden way. That book was excellent and very practical in terms of being able to apply it. We'll talk about the pyramid of success that John created. But to your point about that preparation, there was something in the book where they talked about the preparation, and he had this rule that he wouldn't call a timeout because he wanted to make sure that his players basically set the tone for his players to be able to, like what you said, to be so prepared from practice that the game actually seemed slow, that they were able to manage through that. And I think that's really important as we talk about America getting their A game back, because I think that in much of what is happening is being focused on the game itself. It's like we want to show up, we want to look good, we want to make money, we want to be impressive, whatever, it is. We want to win the game without doing the work. I'm not talking about, like, I don't want to stereotype everyone, but there's a large portion of that. It's like, it's all about show. And I remember actually somebody one time, I did a program and I asked her, and I said, she was on stage and so forth. And I said, how much of that, and I was being respectful, but I asked her on the side, I said, honestly, how much of this is really you? And she was a friend of mine. And how much of it is really show? And she said, honey, it's all show business. And I was like, see, now that's the problem, right? And I noticed it coming as I'm Canadian. So coming down to the US and experiencing that, I noticed that it is an observation that there is much of that going on. And of course, I was also in LA, so there was a little bit more emphasis there.
Yeah.
But so talk a little bit about what does it take for us to get that A game back, based on what you learned from Coach Wooden, and the importance of preparation in all of that.
Yeah, well, Coach liked to say that a failure to prepare is preparing to fail. And much of what you're talking about today, this swagger that we think we all have to have, right? The old Nikon commercial, image is everything. But Coach thought, one of his favorite phrases was, understanding the difference between character and reputation. Character is what you really are. Reputation is just what you appear to be. And people are so busy and so worried about their reputation and how they appear to be, they aren't spending nearly enough time focused on developing what it takes to become who they really are and the strong character they need to be the best that they can be. Um, Even the way John Wooden played basketball as a coach, he didn't like the fancy stuff. He thought that somebody just standing in place and dribbling the ball between their legs, right, was activity without achievement. The goal is to get the ball down the court, not stand and show off what a great dribbler you are. When he coached, if you did that, he was likely to put you on the bench. But today, that kind of play is celebrated. It's called handles. He's got great handles. And the more they do it, the more they're celebrated, the more swagger they have. Coach doesn't think that's fundamentally the best way to play the game. And understanding that idea of swagger relates very specifically to the pyramid of success and where he has confidence placed, which is one of his 25 behaviors on the pyramid. Confidence is one of the blocks. So you absolutely have to have confidence. But the question is, what is true confidence and where does it come from? And it's not a feeling. It's not a swagger. It's not an image. Real confidence comes from real preparation and real work. Knowing what you did, knowing that what you did to prepare was all that you could do to be the best prepared that you could be. We could teach a quick seminar on the pyramid of success. I don't think we really have time. But if you looked at John Wooden's pyramid and you go through the 16 behaviors that it takes to get up to confidence, this was what confidence is. It's all of those things below. It's the hard work that you put in. It's the enthusiasm you show. It's your ability to be a good friend and a good teammate and cooperative. It's how much you're under control. It's how alert and how alive you are, how good you are at pursuing your goals, how well conditioned you are, what a good team player you are. You get all those things in place. Now you can be confident because you're prepared and you've put in the effort it takes to be a confident person or a confident player and have the best opportunity to do your best. On Coach Wooden's pyramid, right beside confidence, is a block called poise. Poise, which Coach Wooden defines just being yourself. Well, if you've gone through all this hard work and all this preparation and you've done your best, you can be poised. You can feel good being yourself. And oh, by the way, you're going to be truly confident.
Absolutely. And I just pulled out the pyramid of success in the book, and it's in chapter 5, and you get into this. And there is a structure to this, which was very interesting. And so, yeah, we could do a whole course on it right now. But
yes.
I would recommend to our listeners and viewers to get a copy of this book. Number one, it goes through, there's some pre-work in really understanding who you are in the fundamentals. And then it gets into assessing your behavior, and there's practices in here and so forth. They're really, really fantastic, this worksheet, the worksheets and so forth. But can you just, like, as an overview, talk about how this pyramid is actually structured? Because it's not just a lot of nice qualities, because at face value, you kind of look at it and you go, oh, there's a whole bunch of qualities that you need to develop. But he actually put it together in a specific way with what's at the bottom was intentional and what's at the top, like you said, confidence has a place and it's not at the bottom.
At the bottom. Yeah. Nicole, I've spent 20 years now looking at, thinking about, teaching, analyzing, learning, understanding John Wooden's pyramid of success. Uh, it turns you into a student of human performance behavior and the psychology behind all that. John Wooden was a great student of human psychology and human behavior. Um, and he built the pyramid. Interestingly, one of the things I like to share with people is if you think about the best idea you've ever had in your life, okay, and everybody thinks they've had one, all right. Now you take this idea and you spend the next 14 years working on that idea, and then you come up with a diagram and you can put that idea on one page. That's John Wooden's pyramid of success. He worked on that for 14 years, trying to identify every single one of these behaviors, and not just whether or not the behavior should be part of his attainment of true success, but exactly where each of these blocks fit in relationship to each other. And that's where I think the science and the magic of John Wooden's pyramid all comes together. You really can learn from every single block. Let me give you an example. His block industriousness is where he started. That was the first block he put in place. Industriousness. He calls it one of the cornerstones. The other cornerstone was enthusiasm. Well, how do those two things go together? Well, it's interesting that he even chose the word industriousness, which isn't a word that's that common in our language today. But remember, this was in the 20s and 30s when we were in the industrial age, weren't we? And we were beginning to develop big industry and large industry. So the word industriousness really helped to define the idea of not just hard work, but very productive work that produced very tangible results that you could see. And then he put the two elements together that constitute industrious, the level of effort you bring and the quality of the planning that's involved in doing the work. All of us can get a lot more done if we do a little better planning every day to try to get that work done. That actually was one of the things that he was just absolutely brilliant at, how he organized his time and every task and the way he planned to get things done. And oh, by the way in which he then carried out his plan. So he built this pyramid from the bottom up. He talks about the first five behaviors being the foundations: industriousness, enthusiasm, friendship, loyalty, and cooperation. So industriousness and enthusiasm, how do those two things together? Coach says you can never do your best work unless you really love what you do, right? When I'm enthusiastic about what I do, there's a better chance I can bring a higher level of effort to the industriousness I'm trying to accomplish. The next three blocks he put in place, those two things relate to us as individuals. I work hard, I'm enthusiastic about what I do. But the next three blocks add others: friendship, loyalty, and cooperation. Those can only happen with more than one person involved, right? Well, simply to ask yourself, well, what's the relationship between industriousness and why is it next to friendship? How hard is it to have really good friends, and how hard do you have to work to make friendship flourish? You have to work very hard, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why he put those. And then what's the relationship between friendship and loyalty? Are people more likely to be loyal to people they have um, friendships with and good relationships with?
Yes.
They are. And loyalty and cooperation. Are people who are loyal to each other more likely to cooperate better with you? So, I mean, you can take every block and show the relationships. Early on, you had made a point about coaching and that a lot of people had learned things from their father, which he did. Part of my early involvement was because John Wooden was the father, the grandfather, and the great grandfather I never had. And part of my journey with him is so personal and emotional. Um, I was a third generation abandoned son. My dad left when I was 3, and his dad left when he was young, and his dad left when he was young. So we didn't have fathers raising their boys in my family for over 100 years. And one of my goals in life was to break that chain of abandonment, which I've been able to do with my 2 boys. Sorry. And my grandsons. So when I had the privilege to begin to work with John Wooden, wow, he was everything I could have ever imagined. A father, a grandfather, a teacher, a coach, a mentor could ever be. And that's why he was so transformative in my life. I'd even say, he was really a high character, high values guy. That wasn't me. I'm the last guy on the planet that ought to be teaching this. I'm a low character guy trying to be a high character guy, trying to learn how to be a high character guy so I can help others who are on that very same journey. And he was such a pinnacle of what all that represented. So he became that coach and mentor, and everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs a mentor. Everybody needs a role model. I think Charles Barkley once said, "Hey, I'm not your kid's role model." Coach Wooden would say, "Oh, yes, you are, Charles. If young men look up to you, then you have a responsibility to be the kind of man they can look up to and to do your best and be your best." We all have that responsibility to teach and coach and love and serve. That's what Coach Wooden's whole life was about.
Yes, and thank you for sharing that. I wanted you to share a little bit of your story. And you know what I love is that, and it's kind of like almost like a litmus test. When I speak to people, and if the most successful, like we're talking about, people are humble. And even you mentioned about in the book John Wooden's last words, and how he was still working on it, still working on it. He was not arrogant enough to think that he had ever arrived. And it was interesting, like you said, I'm a person of low character. I've read your bio. I've read up on you, and so I know that you're a person of integrity and the perfect person to do this work and to bring the essence of what Coach Wooden taught to the world. So I just wanted to comment on that, because even it's funny, like when people do assessments and they're like, "I'm all that. I'm good. I'm good. I'm a 10. I'm a 10. I'm a 10. I'm a 10 over here." And it's interesting is the people that are the most successful, or the ones that are probably the most able to put a 10 out of 10, are the ones that will be humble and say, "I'm still working on it," and be honest with themselves. And I think that's an important quality. Certainly Coach Wooden had it. I see that in you as well. So with that, I actually want to talk about, because there was a lot of talk about coaches, leaders using these terminologies, right? So coaching, leading, being a thought leader is an example, right? Everybody's a thought leader nowadays, and mentorship. So what is the difference between a coach, a leader, and a mentor?
Great question. I think we try to frame that very specifically in our book. And I think it's really an evolution culturally and in business and in communities that we're really going through. I think we grew up thinking that it was all about leadership, and the model was primarily a top down leadership. We look to our president, we look to our generals, we look to our pastors, and right there in these high positions. The leader is up there, down there, up there somewhere, and everybody else is down here somewhere. So there was that hierarchical relationship, and I think that's how we thought about leaders. But there's an awful lot of skepticism these days about leaders at every level, in every organization, in our countries, in our communities, in our political offices. And particularly young people today are very skeptical about the idea of leadership, right? Um, and that's why we really think that today that the top of the standard is really the idea of being an effective head coach. The notion that all great coaches are good leaders, but not all good leaders are great coaches. And we think that it's really a higher level of requirement to be a great coach because it encompasses leadership. We also think it encompasses mentorship. It's actually, we diagram a 5-stage process of the way we thought John Wooden coached that starts with it's all about the quality of your thinking. If you're going to be a good coach, that can only come out of the quality of your thinking day to day and the primary values that are shaping your thinking and the primary inputs that are providing basically all the assets and resources for good thinking. So we spend a lot of time in the book challenging you to think about your thinking and know that today everybody they're feeling bad and they find themselves behaving in a way that that surprises them or they're not comfortable with or they don't want to continue. But all of that starts in our mind.
Yes.
Everything that we're feeling and everything that we do starts with the way that we're thinking every day. So getting your head right is really the beginning of the process. And when you study John Wooden's life, he spent his whole life as a lifelong learner. There was a little principle his dad gave him in something called the 7-point creed when he was literally just about to graduate from junior high. One of those principles was drink deeply from good books. His dad, as a man of faith, said, especially the Bible, but that wasn't John be a reader. What he was saying to his son, make sure everything you put in your mind, son, is worthwhile. And we live in a world today where we're being just bombarded with a lot of stuff that is absolutely useless and worthless for our day to day thinking to help shape us to be the kind of people, the kind of community that we want to be and need to be. So much of all of the problems that surround all of the racial issues today are so confused by the stereotypes and distorted thinking, the distorted views that people have about each other and their cultures. The less
Yes.
we know about each other, the worse it is, right? The more we know, the more we learn about each other, the more we share each other's lives, the more likely we are to understand the things that ultimately we need to understand to be able to love each other and care for each other and be considerate of each other every day. One of the reasons that we're not learning anything because nobody's listening, right? Nobody's listening. In Coach Wooden's definition of cooperation, he has the phrase, listen if you want to be heard. Listen if you want to be heard. Be more interested in finding the best way than in having your own way. Well, today nobody wants to listen and everybody wants their own way. So you wonder why nobody cooperates with each other, right? Coach had
Yes.
it sounds simple, but it's very deep and it's very profound. The longer you look at the things John Wooden teaches us, the deeper and deeper they get and the more important they become.
And these are timeless principles. These are timeless principles that he has spent the time to bring together. It's not like he made them up, but he has disseminated, like you said, spent 14 years putting this together and then building on it from there. And I know that you've got a course that you now have, and the John Wooden course, and you've got, of course, the book and so forth. So to be able to teach these things, and what you talked about there is so true. Even the information that's out there, so we know very little about each other, and what we do hear is negative. And so people then hear that and make assumptions about other people based on what the media is saying. And I think there's a huge detriment that the media is creating in this environment, because, and I don't think there's anybody that would dispute that, because there's so much misinformation and distorted information that is out there. But actually the people that I get to meet, and they're from so many different walks of life, you know, there's a lot of good people out there, and there's a lot of good people that actually do want to seek to understand given the opportunity and stepping back and not trying to be so busy being heard that they're not listening. But the opportunities there, we're talking about America getting their A game back. It's the opportunities are there for us. And I think that the ground is fertile, if you will. The ground is fertile for us to do that. And I think there's a lot of people that want to do that, but we've got to change our thinking. We got to start thinking about our thinking in order to make that happen. So really, really powerful. Thoughts on that?
I also think a lot of the things that we think that we have to discover, we already know. Our country, our communities, our schools were built on solid foundations and solid values, but we're losing sight of all those things. The things on which John Wooden built his life, primary values he had, how he thought about success, thought about the lessons you learn and how you use experience. The idea that there's no such thing as failure. The only true failure is the failure to do things when they need to be done. It's only an opportunity to learn and grow, and through adversity, it's the only way that we really develop strength. And if we don't do that, it fails to develop the strength that lies within us. We have it within ourselves. We have the strength, we have the knowledge, we have the values, we have the understanding. We don't have to go out and search for a new blueprint to make America great again. We know what the formula is. We just need to return to some of those foundations and fundamentals.
Absolutely. Well said. And with that, I think that's a great place to land and to encourage everyone to get a copy of your book, Coach 'em Way Up, 5 Lessons for Leading the John Wooden Way. Also, there is an assessment. I mentioned it earlier. That assessment is excellent. I did it in the book. And you know what? You got to be honest with yourself when you do these assessments. If you puff yourself up and are like, I'm all that and more, you're not going to learn a lot. So, but going through it and really being honest with yourself with these questions, there is a code in the book. So buy the book, and then you actually get a code for 50% off the online assessment in the book. And so that is excellent. All of this is going to be in the show notes on Leaders of Transformation, where you can get the book. Of course, you can find it on Amazon, but all the easy links are going to be there for you. You can also go to coachamwayup.com. And also you can go to woodencourse.com to learn more about the course itself. Anything else you would like to share about that you think it's important for our listeners to hear?
Key idea is that we're really giving everybody the opportunity, based on Coach Wooden's wisdom, to really become an effective head coach of their own life.
Yes.
Right? Be good to yourself. Promote yourself to this position of being head coach of your own life. There is no one more capable of holding that position than you are, and no one has more at stake, right, than you do. So you are the head coach of your own life. And if you do a good job of that, there's a pretty good chance you're going to have the privilege, the responsibility, and the opportunity to coach others. Most of our success comes down to how well we coach ourselves, but most of the joy in life will come from how well we serve and help others. And I think that's what Coach Wooden did so amazingly for almost 100 years. That's the other part that's so special about Wooden. These weren't just theories. He lived his life after all of these ideas and did it for an entire century, and stands as a model for what true success really looks like.
Absolutely. And what better legacy to leave for others than that example, for sure. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for extracting this information from Coach. I know that he initially said no, and you were persistent, and then he turned around and said, "Oh, actually, yeah, we will do this." And so, but to take the time to really glean and interview him and glean the information from not just his theories, from his examples, so that we can still be learning and studying from it so many years later. Yes.
Yeah, could I take just maybe one more little page out of
Please.
Coach Wooden's book? I'd like to end this where Coach Wooden used to like to end. He spoke to a lot of people over a lot of years. And he always had a really powerful way of ending each segment. And it spoke so much about who he was and what he was all about. He had a little poem he shared, and the poem was called "A Little Fellow Follows Me." Could I share that with your audience?
Please. I
Yeah.
would love that.
Yeah, the poem went something like this. A careful man I must be, a little fellow follows me. I do not dare to go astray, for fear he'll go the same self way. I cannot once escape his eyes. Whatever he sees me do, he tries. Like me, he says he's going to be, this little fellow who follows me. He thinks that I am good and fine, believes in every word of mine. The base in me he must not see, this little fellow who follows me. I must remember as I go through summer sun and winter snow, I am building for the years to be this little fellow who follows me. And Coach would say, and that's like every one of us. Everybody is building somebody else's life. Be careful.
Amen. That's a great place to end. Thank you, Lynn, so much. And thank you to our listeners for being here. I trust that you are inspired and encouraged. And leaders of transformation take action. And so go get a copy of Lynn's book. And by the way, we didn't mention it, but he wrote this book actually in conjunction with his co-author, Jason Lavin, and with Jim Eber. And so this was a team effort in true Wooden style, a team effort to write this book. And so I would encourage you to get a copy of that, learn more about the course, and they can come into your company and bring this information in and teach it to your teams and so forth. It's fantastic. Highly encourage you to do that. But regardless of that, please take action on something, even if it is stopping and start thinking about your thinking. Do something with the information, because unless you take action upon the information that you learn, nothing happens. Listening to podcasts are wonderful. I highly encourage it to come back and listen every week. But it's when you act upon it, it's when you start thinking and start allowing it to transform the way you see yourself, the way you show up, that's what makes the difference. And so we encourage you that. We'd love to hear your stories and your comments and how this has inspired you, or maybe shifted something in you, or how this has translated into your life. You can reach us, of course, through our website at leadersoftransformation.com. You can follow us on social, subscribe, and follow on your favorite podcasting platform. We encourage you to do that. And come back next week, and we'll have another wonderful guest to share with you. So we look forward to seeing you then. Have a great day.